Welcome back to Money Pop. Oil just did something that it has not done since 1975. And if history repeats, which it almost always does, then what comes next is frankly unthinkable. The entire oil and energy supply chain has experienced unprecedented disruption. And so far, we are only seeing a sliver of the consequences that this will have on the global economy in the medium to longer term. Around 20 million barrels of oil used to pass through the Strait of Hormuz each day, and that route saw an 80% drop in tanker traffic within days of the conflict starting. The situation has now deteriorated even further, with traffic at a near total halt due to attacks and threats from Iran. We have also watched Saudi Arabia's largest refinery suffer damage and shut down, while Qatar Energy has suspended LNG production, removing roughly 20% of the global LNG supply from the market. Economists have described the situation as being doubly worse than the 1970s energy crisis. With many of the main Gulf exporters cutting production or seeing their facilities suffer major damage that could hamper long-term supply levels, and with freight becoming almost impossible to access and freight rates skyrocketing, crude oil prices have spiked to just shy of $100 per barrel. That is a staggering 50% increase compared to prices before the conflict only a few weeks ago. The surge is so unprecedented that it stands as a complete outlier in year-to-date gains compared to any other recent year. And right now, it is very likely that this surge in the price of oil is still being somewhat suppressed. Part of that comes from short-term storage facilities in many countries not yet being fully drained, and from supply already on the water that managed to reach its final destination safely. The probable price suppression is also helped by the fact that 400 million barrels of oil were just released by IEA member countries last week in an effort to stabilize supply and prices. That is absolutely not a long-term solution. The major fear here is that the longer this conflict drags on and the more serious the damage dealt to major oil and gas facilities, the more severe the supply shortage will be in the long run. That would have a permanent impact on the global energy supply chain and consequently on energy prices. Bloomberg Economics estimates that a 1% drop in global oil supply typically triggers a 4% increase in the price of oil. Considering that much of the global supply is currently offline, with a significant portion likely to stay offline for the long run, we are not likely to see oil prices drop anytime soon. United CEO Scott Kirby just said in a letter to employees that the airline is preparing for oil to reach $175 per barrel. And oil analysts now see a very possible scenario where oil reaches $200 to $250 per barrel. Aside from the obvious price increases that we are seeing immediately in things like gasoline, there's also a hidden food price crisis on the horizon. The Middle East accounts for about 45% of global fertilizer supply, with the Strait of Hormuz handling roughly 1/3 of global trade volume. The supply shock that we are about to see in fertilizer will have catastrophic consequences, especially as we head into the spring planting season. Chris Abbott, the CEO of Pivot Bio, warned that there is nothing that could be more impactful other than an insane weather event. This creates a delayed inflation bomb, because the fertilizer shortage will not show up in food prices and grocery bills immediately. Reduced crop yields and higher production costs could drive food prices up for a long time. February's CPI reading came in at 2.4%, a 0.3% increase month on month, and it only captures the very beginning of the conflict. Analysts at Goldman Sachs say that number is already outdated, since the data does not capture the surge in oil prices that we have seen. The Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure, PCE, is now projected to finish 2026 at 2.7%, up significantly from December's forecast of 2.4% just a few months ago. Inflation expectations going forward continue to surge by the day. U.S. 12-month inflation expectations have now reached 5.2%, the highest level since March of 2023. The markets now see a 50% chance of a U.S. rate hike by December of 2026, a stark contrast to just a few weeks ago when 4 rate cuts were expected by the end of the year. With all signs pointing toward higher inflation, which is only going to get more extreme the longer this conflict drags on, the economy is spiraling headfirst towards stagflation. The National Retail Federation has warned that consumer spending will likely be hit negatively, and that an extra $10 per week on fuel means consumers will cut back on entertainment, dining out, and discretionary purchases. Mark Zandi of Moody's has also warned that if the conflict is prolonged, the damage will become significantly more severe, with businesses likely to reduce hiring and increase layoffs. The job market is already weakening, with layoffs rising, hiring stalling, and job openings declining. Businesses across the economy are showing signs of weakness, while the rapid advancement of AI is creating an escalating threat to job security. With consumers having less disposable income on average thanks to inflation and